Molly watched from the front door of the mansion as her husband Philip got into his Jaguar XJ. She waved and blew him a kiss. Philip smiled and waved back before pulling out of the driveway and heading to the airport for his flight to New York. Molly leaned contentedly against the doorframe and enjoyed the South Florida morning. It was still cool, but soon the heat would begin to increase. Their small front yard was ablaze with lantana and penta, and two gorgeous bougainvilleas framed the front door and small porch. The air was filled with their floral scent, and butterflies flew from flower to flower. Molly was a red-haired 30-year-old beauty with an outgoing personality and a fiery independent streak. She was an editor at a publishing house that worked primarily with authors of romance novels and other fiction aimed at female tastes. With the advent of modern electronics, it became profitable to work from home, so she converted the second bedroom of their townhouse into a very functional office. Philip and Molly had been married for 7 years. Philip was 19 years older than Molly. Her family and friends were stunned by the age difference when they married, but as Molly explained to her younger sister and select friends, the advantage of older men was that they were patient, consummate lovers who knew how to please a woman, unlike some of the young bulls her age she had slept with. After all, everyone knows that you drink aged wine and not new, because old tastes much better and richer. It didn't hurt that Philip was rich, very rich. Philip was from North America and, of course, was educated at Harvard. He increased the family fortune through his highly successful international electronics company. Molly was no fortune hunter, but still a girl should be aware of any silver linings that potential suitors might bring to the altar. Molly came to South Florida from poor coal country in Kentucky in search of education and opportunities that were not available at home. She found both. Philip saw a gorgeous young woman waiting tables at a nightclub while she was finishing her graduate degree in English at a local university. Inexplicably, he was struck down by Cupid's arrow, and they were soon married. So, in the end, Molly was a happily married young woman who was well-coiffed and pampered, pursuing a career she enjoyed. During the late winter and spring, the couple lived in their Florida townhouse. During the height of summer and fall until New Year's, they lived in their main and much larger home near the highlands in the mountains of North Carolina. It was a real mansion with several year-round servants and all the trappings of truly rich people. The South Florida townhouse was their personal retreat for just the two of them. Philip's business often required 1 or 2 trips per month, usually lasting 3 to 5 days, sometimes more. This was not a burden for Molly, as she had a job, several hobbies, and was an avid fitness enthusiast. In addition, the townhouse was only 2 blocks from the beach, and a half-mile away was also a beachfront strip of upscale shopping, restaurants, bars, and nightclubs with various entertainment options. She and Philip visited there often, and when he was away, she also visited them without hesitation. After all, she was a grown, modern woman. Molly watched her husband disappear on the way to the airport. He was a good man and a wonderful husband. She, in turn, was a devoted and faithful wife. Well, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. She was truly very devoted to Philip, and they made a great couple. But she was also a vibrant, young, and very sexy woman with an older husband of a different generation. This combination sometimes leads to unpleasant complications. 3 or 4 years ago, Molly began to succumb to the siren song of carnal temptation in Philip's absence. She may have lost her way once or twice over the years. No, that's not entirely correct either. Perhaps there was more to it than that. Let's just say she was a friendly, easygoing woman with a healthy carnal appetite and leave it at that. In times past, the husband had complete ownership of his wife and her precious physical assets. In today's world, a husband's rights to his wife's physical property are more like a lease agreement than a sales agreement. Therefore, when the tenant, the husband in this case, is unable to use the said premises, it makes sense for the landlord, the wife in this case, to sublet her assets to another man in the absence of the main tenant. In this case, one can view Molly's extramarital activities as those of a prudent businesswoman maximizing the return and use of her valuable carnal assets, which are in significant demand on the open market. After all, Molly was just a spoiled young woman, fooling around occasionally for fun and excitement, but with no serious intentions. Philip was a cosmopolitan, highly educated socialite with brilliant business abilities. He was a convinced realist and had no illusions. He knew that men would propose to his sexy young wife as soon as his back was turned, and his young wife will be strongly seduced by young stallions of her age. How could it be otherwise? This is an ancient tale, often told in literature and played out in life. Philip believed that he had a Ferrari as a wife. Such a treasure had no value locked in the garage. Sometimes a Ferrari has to be allowed to run wild on the open road. If one wants to enjoy driving such a magnificent piece of physical art, one must also accept that there may be speeding tickets along the way. Philip was tolerant of his young wife's potential sexual peccadillos. They didn't have an explicit agreement, but he was thoughtful in his actions, and she was reserved. Philip kept his wife informed of his schedule and tried not to show up at home unexpectedly. And most importantly, he did not poke his nose into other people's affairs. Molly, for the most part, limited her flirtations to times when he was traveling. Such dates also tended to be limited to their time in South Florida. There were servants and too many friends and relatives back in North Carolina to be promiscuous without causing a public scandal. But here in South Florida, they were far from their usual social environment, and the area was overrun with vacationers and snowbirds escaping the winter weather. In this anonymous mass, prey was plentiful and easy for such a sexy, young creature like Molly. Molly looked outside, towards the beach. Andre walked briskly just in time. He was a slender, dark-haired, cheerful man about her age. She waved enthusiastically and smiled happily. Andre waved back. Last year, Andre asked Molly to dance at a nightclub, and one thing quickly led to another. He was a Parisian and apparently wealthy, as he took a month off every spring to vacation in South Florida. He had a large beach house a few blocks from Molly's townhouse, and they met there periodically when Philip was out of town. But today, Andre came to her, wanting to renew their stormy acquaintance last year. He had only arrived yesterday, and when he called shortly after arriving, he was glad that her husband was leaving that morning. A shiver of excitement ran through Molly's body. Well, you know what they say about French lovers. She could vouch that their reputation was well-deserved. Molly fell for the exotic, dark charm of a foreign lover, like in the romance novels she edited. His sexy, accented English just turned her into mush. Sex with my husband was wonderful. Sex with Andre was a spicy, forbidden lust of the unknown and dangerous. She loved both types of sex. These were simply different spheres of sexual experience that did not intersect. As Andre stepped onto the porch, Molly reached out, pulled him inside, and closed the door. She hugged him and smothered him with a deep kiss, passionately pushing her tongue into his mouth. Andre responded to her passion. Molly broke the kiss, turned, and, breathless with anticipation, dragged Andre up the stairs to the family bedroom. When they entered the bedroom, Molly began to take off his clothes, and he responded in kind. The naked couple quickly walked towards the bed. It was an antique iron bed, high enough that Molly had to take a short leap to sit on the edge. Andre pushed her onto her back and knelt by the bed. Andre began deliciously kissing Molly's prized assets as her legs dangled from his shoulders, squeezing, straining, and twitching erratically in spasms of pleasure. She ran her fingers through Andre's dark hair and hugged him tighter. Then footsteps were heard on the stairs, and a fatal call. "Darling," because her attention was diverted by Andre's ministrations between her thighs. Molly didn't hear her husband's car pull up, the automatic lock on the car door jingle, and the front door open. The most terrible moment of the adulterous encounter has arrived. The unsuspecting husband suddenly appears on the scene. Andre's head shot up between Molly's legs, eyes wide with alarm. From Molly's point of view, looking down on him, Andre looked like a frightened groundhog jumping out of his hole to look at some unexpected danger. The approaching catastrophe of her husband's imminent arrival at the amorous spectacle precluded any delay. Otherwise, Molly would have shuddered with laughter at the sight of Andre between her thighs, looking around in horror. Andre hissed, "Your husband," simultaneously with Molly's hiss. "My husband." "Honey, the airline sent a message that my flight was canceled. I'll take a later flight." The couple jumped out of bed. They heard Philip's slow footsteps as he walked up the stairs. It was a dull blow of fate, approaching step by step. Andre grabbed Molly's hand and whispered hysterically, "Oh my God, what should we do?" Andre was scared. Molly thought there was something. The deceived husband, upon discovering an intruder in his wife's bed, often reacts quite violently with anger, usually directed at the intruder. Philip's muscular and athletic physique was part of her attraction to him. At one time, Philip was even a moderately successful heavyweight in the Harvard Boxing Club. Andre was more of an intellectual type, inclined towards poetry and art, rather than sports. If it came to a conflict, there could hardly be any doubt about the result, despite their different ages. There was little choice: accept and surrender to Philip's mercy, or hide Andre. Molly feverishly assessed the worsening situation, like a general on the battlefield holding back a catastrophic defeat. Philip was too close for Andre to sneak into her office in the second bedroom. Both the closet and the bathroom would provide initial cover, but there was no cover inside if Philip happened to look in there. But the antique bed has at least a 30-inch gap, and the blanket hangs almost to the floor. Molly pushed Andre towards the bed and hissed insistently, "Get in deep and lie still, no matter what happens." Andre did not hesitate. He threw himself on the floor. There was a dull thud as Andre's head hit the lower iron railing. Andre chuckled, stopped, and grabbed his forehead. Molly put her foot on Andre's bare bottom, pushing him forward, and desperately whispered, "For God's sake, hurry up!" Andre redoubled his efforts, crawling under the bed. The last thing Molly saw was his shuffling feet, desperately pushing his bare buttocks and legs under the bed. My God! This is turning into a vaudeville farce or one of Shakespeare's twisted comedies, she thought. Molly smoothed out the blanket where they had crumpled the surface a minute before. Jumping off the bed, she grabbed their discarded clothes and shoes, which lay in a heap on the bedroom floor. Molly rushed into the bathroom and shoved everything into the dirty clothes basket. She sang, "I'm in the bathroom, dear. I'm drawing a bath." With these words, Molly turned on the bath tube faucet. She was a versatile girl and periodically enjoyed sensual relaxation by reading trashy novels. That was at least a plausible explanation for her nakedness. Molly hurried back and searched the bedroom for any incriminating evidence that might alert her husband to the intruder's presence. Like this. One of Andre's shoes fell out of her collection of discarded clothes. Molly was a great soccer player in high school and kicked her shoe under the bed. In desperation, she may have put too much humph into the blow, and a startled grunt came from under the bed. Approaching the bedroom door, seemingly calmly, Molly faked a smile and asked, "What did you say happened with your flight?" "Is something wrong, dear?" Philip walked through the bedroom door. His large, muscular figure, dressed in a sharp Bryany suit, exuded an air of competence and masculinity. "Oh yes, this is the man I married, and for a reason," Molly reminded herself. "Oh no, it's okay. The airline texted me halfway to the airport that my flight was canceled, and I was rebooked on a later flight. I sent you..." Philip froze, staring at the unexpected vision of his beautiful, naked wife looking at him with her brilliant brown eyes sparkling with amusement. Perhaps that spark was fear or excitement rather than amusement, or perhaps it was a combination of all three. I didn't expect such a nice welcome home. As I said, I sent you a message saying I was coming home and suggested we have a cup of coffee with one of those beautiful blueberry muffins, which you prepared this morning." Among her many talents, Molly was also an accomplished cook. She enjoyed preparing food and culinary delights for Philip. Molly struck a saucy pose, sticking her hip out and brazenly raising her hand on her hip. "Oh, I left my phone downstairs and didn't see the message. Well, I was going to take a good soak before I started my editing job. She continued to tease. I suppose I can be persuaded to put it off for coffee and muffins with my husband. Molly turned and retreated into the bathroom, turning off the tap. She shouted over her shoulder, "And how much time do you have, dear?" As Molly reached for the robe hanging on the bathroom door, two muscular arms wrapped around her and effortlessly lifted her off the ground. Philip carried his struggling and laughing wife to the bed, where he laid her face down on the blanket. He held her there with one hand, removing her clothes while she playfully tried to run away. After all, she had no desire to actually shy away from what was about to happen. Philip said with a laugh, "Oh, you little minx, long enough to have a quickie with his wife and then have coffee and muffins with her." Panicked, Andre lay motionless, face down under the bed. His forehead was throbbing where he'd hit his head on the headboard, and his face was burning where Molly had kicked him with her boot. He forced himself to lie still, like a corpse. He had seen Philip and Molly several times last year. He had no desire to come face to face with the big man whose wife he had so thoroughly fooled last year and had just tried to repeat. Andre suspected that such a confrontation would not end well for him. Andre could hear everything that was said between the wife and husband and observe what was happening. Well, he could watch what was happening on the floor. He heard Molly land on the bed above him and saw her husband's clothes cascade to the floor and be tossed aside. Apparently, Philip spread Molly's legs. Andre had Molly's engine firing on all cylinders before her husband arrived. Now she was warmed up and hot. The bed began to heave rhythmically, accompanied by Molly's smooth, happy sighs that Andre knew so well from last year. As the pace quickened, Andre began to fear that the 200-year-old cast-iron bed frame would undergo a brittle stress fracture and leave him trapped under the springs, the mattress, and the vigorously copulating bodies. The bed shook, creaked, and groaned, as if she was having a nervous breakdown. The steady slapping of flesh on flesh was accompanied by Molly's frantic cries, "Oh yes, baby, oh yes!" Finally, Philippe let out a bullish roar, rising to his tiptoes, and Molly's legs disappeared from Andre's sight. Molly's joyful cries of, "Oh, oh, oh, oh God!" announced that everyone involved was enjoying successful copulation. The gasping couple sat on the edge of the bed, catching their breath. Molly exhaled. "Oh God, I'm so glad the plane was canceled." Andre, relieved that the bed frame had withstood the dynamic load of the couple's love fest, watched his ankles make their way to the bathroom. Molly pushed Philip towards the shower and ordered, "Take a quick shower, get dressed and come back. I'll make fresh coffee and heat up the muffins." Molly grabbed her robe from the back of the bathroom door and put it on. She blew a kiss to her husband while he was taking a shower, and then returned to the bedroom. Molly tiptoed over to the bed and knelt down to look under it. She covered her mouth to suppress a giggle. Naked, Andre lay motionless right under the place where her husband had just turned off her light. The absurd irony of the situation tickled Molly's funny side. A nasty, yellow-blue welt from the bed frame formed on Andre's forehead, and his right eye began to turn black from the blow from the boot. "Oh, you poor thing," Molly exclaimed quietly. She put her finger to her lips and whispered, "Shh, do not move. The floor squeak. He will hear you. I'll come for you when everything is clear." Andre nodded, indicating that he understood. Molly stood up, collected Philip's clothes from the floor and took them to the bathroom. Then she went downstairs. A few minutes later, Philip got out of the shower, got dressed, and also went downstairs. Andre remained as motionless as a church mouse. He had not the slightest desire to meet Philip in his native lair. As he became increasingly tense, lying motionless in his cramped sanctuary, Andre could hear Molly's sweet, melodious voice and the richer tones of Philip's voice interspersed with light laughter as the couple enjoyed coffee and muffins. A congenial couple sat directly under the place where the wife's upset and beaten lover was hiding. Finally, Molly looked at her watch and exclaimed, "Honey, that was great, but if you're going to catch the plane, you need to get going." Philip winced. "You're right." It really was great, but I have to go." The couple kissed warmly at the door, and Molly watched her delightful husband drive away for the second time that morning. As Molly turned to walk up the stairs, her phone on the table by the door buzzed with an incoming message. There were 2 messages from Philip, an old one about a canceled flight and his return home, and a new one that had just arrived. "Thank you for a wonderful morning. Don't have too much fun without me today." And a winking emoticon. Molly sat down on the steps with a mysterious smile, looking thoughtfully at the message. Andre still acted like a good boy and hid under the bed, waiting for her to free him. He could have waited a little longer. She needed to think about it. Does Philip somehow know about Andre? The mention of today's fun and the winking face made her think, but it can also be completely innocent. It was unclear how Felipe could have guessed Andre's presence, but she also knew that Philip was a spice. He would put Sherlock Holmes to shame. Did he put his wife on top of her lover on purpose, just for fun? Or out of spite? Or was it just a coincidence? Who knows what conclusions Philip, with his brilliant mind, might draw about today? Molly often wondered if her husband suspected or guessed about her sloppy occasional forays beyond marital boundaries. She, of course, appreciated his obvious tolerance and leniency towards her sins and tried to keep everything a secret so as not to embarrass her husband. Molly sat on the stairs for several minutes, deep in thought. Philip was truly one of those one-in-a-million husbands. He was much older, and there were pros and cons to having such a husband. In Philip's case, the pros definitely outweighed the cons. She reminded herself grimly that those women with husbands around the same age would have much more time to enjoy with their husbands than she had with Philip. Perhaps it's time to grow up and take your marriage more seriously. Molly quickly typed a message to her husband. It was written there, "Plans have changed, dear. First I'll take out the trash, then I pack my things and catch an afternoon flight to New York. Tell the Four Seasons front desk that your wife will be joining you at this time." She closed the message with the same winking emoji he sent her, and after that, Philip alone drove a hot and lively Ferrari, and there were no fines for speeding. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.